She had just finished a long day at work. Her body ached, her mind was tired, but she felt a small sense of relief as she parked her car outside the local grocery store. The sun was setting, casting a warm orange glow across the street. The air was filled with the usual sounds of the neighborhood: kids laughing, a dog barking, cars driving past. She checked her phone, scrolling briefly through messages from her children before placing it back on the passenger seat. She had learned to be careful, to always stay aware of her surroundings. Life had not been easy. Every day seemed to bring new challenges, but she faced them all with determination. She thought about her husband, who was far away on deployment. Being a Navy SEAL, he often worked in dangerous situations, but he had always taught her to stay strong, to hold her ground, and to protect her family. As she sat in the car, she noticed a police vehicle slowly approaching. She felt a flicker of unease but tried to ignore it. The officers rolled down their windows and called out to her. She lowered her own window, smiling nervously. "Good evening, ma'am. Can we talk to you for a moment?" one of the officers asked. She nodded politely, trying to appear calm. "Of course, officer. Is there a problem?" The officer's tone was firm, almost confrontational. He pointed toward the back of her car. "We received a complaint about your vehicle being parked here." She glanced around, confused. The lot was nearly empty. "I just pulled in." "I'm only going to be a few minutes," she explained, her voice steady despite the growing tension. He frowned. "I need to see your license and registration." She reached into her purse, her hand shaking slightly. Something about the way he was speaking made her uneasy. She handed over her documents, trying to stay calm. Another officer approached from the other side of the car, and the situation began to feel heavier, more threatening. The officers started asking more questions, their voices rising. She tried to answer politely, but she felt a lump in her throat. Fear was creeping in. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she wished she could just disappear. She thought about her children and how she had promised to keep them safe. She had to stay calm. Suddenly, the situation escalated. One of the officers grabbed her arm roughly, causing her to wince in pain. "Ma'am, step out of the car," he commanded. She hesitated, feeling a surge of panic. "Please, I haven't done anything wrong. Can you just tell me what's going on?" she pleaded. Her words seemed to fall on deaf ears. The officer's grip tightened, and she was forced out of the car. The cold air hit her face, and she stumbled slightly. She tried to hold herself together, but the shock and fear made her tremble. Passers-by began to stop and watch, their faces filled with concern. The other officer approached, and without warning, he shoved her against the car. Pain shot through her side. She tried to steady herself, but they continued to push and yell. She felt helpless, a wave of humiliation and anger washing over her. Her mind raced, thinking about how quickly things had spiraled out of control. She remembered the lessons her husband had taught her. Stay calm, think clearly, and protect yourself. She took a deep breath, trying to focus. The officers were strong, but she had her own strength, and she needed to use it wisely. She realized that panicking would only make things worse. Through the chaos, she noticed her phone on the seat of the car. She had to reach it. Somehow, she had to get in touch with someone who could help. She knew that calling her husband would make a difference. He was trained to handle dangerous situations, and he would know what to do. The officers continued to argue among themselves, distracted for just a moment. She seized the opportunity, moving slightly toward the car. Her hands were trembling as she grabbed her phone. She dialed her husband's number, her fingers almost numb with fear. Each ring felt like an eternity. When he answered, she could barely speak. I don't know what's happening. They're hurting me." Her voice broke, tears streaming down her face. On the other end, his voice was calm but firm. "Stay calm. Tell me what's happening step by step." He had that commanding presence that always made her feel safe, even from miles away. She described the scene as clearly as she could, explaining how the officers had treated her and how she was trying to stay calm. He listened carefully, asking questions to understand every detail. "I've got you. Just stay on the line. Don't let them take your phone away. Keep your voice steady and don't make sudden movements." She clung to his words like a lifeline. His voice reminded her that she wasn't alone. She wasn't powerless. Even as the officers shouted and pushed, she felt a small spark of hope. Someone who cared, someone trained to handle crises, was with her, guiding her through the storm. The crowd around them grew larger, some people filming, others just watching in shock. She could see their faces, the mix of fear, confusion, and anger. Some muttered to each other, questioning why the situation had become so violent over something so minor. She felt a strange comfort in knowing that witnesses were there, even though she was still in pain. Her husband kept talking to her, giving clear instructions. If they try to take the phone, hold on to it tightly. Make noise if you have to. I'm on my way and I'm contacting help now. You're going to be okay. Just breathe. Focus on your breathing. She tried to follow his instructions, inhaling and exhaling slowly, trying to steady her racing heart. The fear was still there, a heavy weight in her chest, but with each word from him it became a little lighter. She felt the first glimmer of control since the encounter had started. The officers seemed frustrated by her compliance and the attention from the onlookers. They continued to argue among themselves, giving her brief moments to think and plan. She knew she had to stay alert, to make every second count until help arrived. Her mind worked quickly, assessing options, thinking about how to protect herself and maintain her dignity, despite the fear and pain. She glanced down at her hands, bruised and shaking, and then back at the officers. Even though she was terrified, she refused to let them break her completely. She had survived hardships before, and she would survive this too. Her children needed her, and she had made a promise to her husband to stay strong. Minutes felt like hours as she remained on the phone, giving updates, following instructions, and trying to remain composed. The officers began to notice that the situation was being observed closely, that someone was aware of their actions. Their aggression seemed slightly tempered, but she knew she couldn't let her guard down. She focused on her breathing, on the words from her husband, on the fact that she had a plan, even if it was just to stay alive and keep her phone. She felt a surge of determination. They could try to intimidate her, to humiliate her, but they could not take away her courage or her resolve. She had faced challenges before, and she would face this one too. Her phone remained a lifeline, a direct connection to someone who could act. She held it tightly, feeling a sense of hope growing despite the pain and fear. Each word from her husband gave her strength, reminding her that she was not alone, that someone was fighting for her even from afar. The crowd began to murmur, some shouting for the officers to stop, others calling out support to her. She realized that she was not invisible, that there were people willing to stand with her even in this frightening moment. It gave her a small but vital sense of courage. The officers hesitated, sensing the attention and realizing that this situation could escalate further if not handled carefully. She remained still, composed, her eyes fixed on the phone, listening to her husband's voice guiding her. She knew that staying calm, following instructions, and holding on to hope were her best tools right now. As she stood there, battered and shaken, she felt a flicker of determination. This would not define her. She would survive, she would protect herself, and she would ensure that what happened did not go unnoticed. She had a purpose now, to stay strong, to stay alive, and to reach the moment when real help arrived. The fight was far from over, but she had already taken the first step by reaching out for help and refusing to be silenced. Her hands were still trembling as she held the phone tightly, her husband's calm voice filling her ears. He asked her to describe everything that was happening in detail, so he could know exactly how to act. She spoke quickly, her words tumbling out as she explained the officer's actions, the push against her body and the fear that had gripped her from the very beginning. She could hear his steady breathing, his measured tone, the kind of voice that could make even the darkest situations seem manageable. Stay calm. Focus on what you can control, he said, and she felt a sense of relief wash over her. She was not alone. He was thinking through every step, planning even from miles away. The officers seemed frustrated by her composure. They were distracted by her calm voice and the presence of onlookers filming the scene. She noticed them glancing around, realizing that their actions were being watched, their authority questioned. That tiny shift gave her a sliver of confidence. She followed her husband's instructions carefully. He told her to keep her hands visible, to make sure she did not make sudden movements, and to continue explaining everything she saw. The crowd murmured, their attention fixed on her, and some even shouted at the officers to stop. Her voice remained strong, clear, and unwavering despite the fear that surged through her. He told her to keep her eyes on the phone and not to engage in any arguments with the officers. "You are documenting everything just by being calm and talking to me," he explained. She felt the truth of his words. She was creating her own safety, step by step, and it empowered her. As they spoke, she remembered the advice her husband had given her before his deployment. He always emphasized awareness and preparation. Every interaction, every moment could be dangerous, and it was important to remain calm, to observe and to act with clarity. Now she was living those lessons, relying on them to get through this moment. Her mind raced with thoughts about her children. She imagined their faces, the worry they would feel if they knew what was happening. She repeated to herself that she had to stay strong, not only for herself but for them, for the promise she had made to her family. Every step she took, every instruction she followed was for their safety. The husband's voice remained her anchor. He instructed her to narrate everything she saw, every movement, every word spoken by the officers. "We need a clear record of this. We're going to make sure it doesn't end here," he said. She felt a sense of purpose rising amidst the fear. She was no longer just a victim. She was an observer, documenting the injustice, taking control in the only way she could. The officers began to grow impatient. They tried to push her further, trying to get her to act without thinking, to respond in a way that could escalate the situation. But she held firm. She followed her husband's guidance, stepping back slightly when needed, breathing slowly and keeping her hands visible. Each instruction she followed gave her a sense of control in a world that seemed intent on taking it away. She noticed a few people in the crowd whispering to one another, pointing their phones, recording the scene. She realized that this small act of bystanders paying attention was another layer of protection. They were witnesses just as important as the words she spoke on the phone. She felt a quiet reassurance that she was not alone in this fight. Her husband's instructions shifted slightly. He told her to describe not only the actions of the officers but also her own feelings, the fear, the pain, and the humiliation. He explained that emotions were powerful, that they told the full story, not just the physical events. She took a deep breath and began to speak about how terrified she was, how hurt and confused, how it felt to be treated this way for something so small. Sharing her fear aloud gave her a strange sense of liberation. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. The officers seemed to realize that their behavior was being scrutinized. Their words were harsher, but their movements were careful. She continued to narrate everything, her husband listening intently, guiding her through each step. He reminded her to stay calm, to stay present, to focus on breathing and observation. She clung to his voice like a lifeline, each word giving her strength. She remembered the basics of self-defense her husband had taught her. Not the fighting, but the mental preparation, the awareness, the ability to anticipate and respond without panic. She focused on her surroundings, noting the people around her, the direction of the officers, the location of her car, and her own positioning. She was preparing herself to act if necessary, but she trusted her husband's judgment more than her own instincts in this moment. Her husband started coordinating support from his end, calling contacts who could help, making sure that legal and practical measures were being put in place. She could hear the faint sounds of him talking to someone else, his voice low but firm, planning, organizing, ensuring that her safety would be reinforced. The knowledge that action was being taken elsewhere gave her a layer of confidence. The officers tried to assert control, but she remained composed. She spoke clearly, narrating their every move and word. Her presence on the phone, the fact that she was documenting everything, seemed to frustrate them. They had expected fear, compliance, maybe silence. Instead, she was active, articulate, and defiant in her own way, showing courage without aggression. She could feel the physical pain from being pushed and grabbed, the lingering soreness in her arms and back. Yet, despite that, she stood tall, her hand steady on the phone, her voice unwavering. She reminded herself that pain was temporary, that fear could be managed, and that she had someone guiding her through every moment. Her husband's voice occasionally softened, reminding her to breathe, to let go of some tension. His words were a mix of strategy and care, reflecting both his training and his love. She realized that this was more than just a crisis. It was a test of her own resilience, of her ability to hold on, to survive, and to assert her presence even under duress. She looked around at the crowd again. Some people had begun to whisper support, calling out to the officers to be careful. Others were recording, providing proof that she was being treated unfairly. She felt a surge of gratitude for their presence, realizing that in moments of fear and helplessness, solidarity could make a difference. The officers, sensing that their actions were being scrutinized more than before, started to hesitate. They were no longer in full control, and she used that moment to steady herself. She continued her narration, giving her husband every detail, ensuring that every movement, every word, every emotional response was captured. She knew that this record could protect her, could make a difference when the immediate danger passed. Her heart still raced, and tears occasionally fell from her eyes, but she felt a growing sense of empowerment. The call with her husband had turned the situation into something she could influence. She was no longer entirely at the mercy of the officers. She had a plan, guidance, and a witness in the form of the phone call. As the minutes dragged on, she felt her courage solidifying. Fear was still present, but it was accompanied by focus, by clarity, by a sense of purpose. She realized that this was not just about surviving the moment. It was about asserting her dignity, documenting injustice, and preparing for the moment when help would arrive. Her husband reminded her one last time to keep her phone close, to continue observing, and to stay calm no matter what happened next. She felt a deep connection with him, a sense of safety that was not dependent on distance or circumstance. In that moment, she understood that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act with clarity and determination despite it. The officers were still present, still tense, but she felt a subtle shift. She was no longer completely overwhelmed by fear. She had a voice, she had strategy, and she had support. She took a deep breath, steadying herself, ready to face whatever came next, knowing that she was not alone, and that every word she spoke on that phone was a step toward justice, toward safety, and toward reclaiming control over her life. By the time she heard her husband's calm voice guiding her, the crowd had grown, their attention fixed on the unfolding scene. Some were filming on their phones, while others shouted words of support, urging the officers to behave. She felt a flicker of hope. People were watching, and she was not completely alone. Even in fear, she drew strength from their presence and from the reassurance of her husband on the phone. Her husband's voice was steady and commanding. He told her to move slightly closer to her car, to ensure she had a safe space to retreat if necessary. She obeyed, careful to keep her hands visible and the phone in her grip. Every movement was deliberate, every step measured. She felt a new sense of control, a quiet power that had not been there before. The officers continued to argue among themselves, frustrated by the situation. Their attempts to intimidate her had not worked, and the presence of bystanders had shifted the balance. She stayed calm, narrating everything to her husband, the officers' gestures, the words they used, their shifting expressions. Her voice was clear and steady despite the throbbing pain in her arms and back. Her husband instructed her to find a brief moment to sit down if possible. The physical strain was taking its toll, and he reminded her to keep her breathing controlled. She eased herself onto the curb, careful to maintain eye contact with the officers without appearing defiant. She felt small, battered but not defeated. Her mind focused on strategy rather than fear. He had already contacted trusted colleagues and legal advisors, ensuring that assistance would arrive quickly. She could hear the faint murmur of conversation from his side of the call, planning and organizing, a lifeline of strategy reaching her across the distance. She felt reassured knowing that action was being taken. Even as she remained in the immediate danger zone, she noticed some of the onlookers whispering to each other, pointing their phones toward the officers capturing the scene. The officers were beginning to notice the scrutiny and hesitated in their actions. Her husband's instructions encouraged her to continue narrating every movement, every word. This documentation was her shield, her way to assert control over the unfolding chaos. Her husband's tone shifted occasionally, softer, reminding her to breathe and to relax her muscles as much as possible under the circumstances. He emphasized mental clarity, observing, analyzing, and documenting everything. She realized that even in fear, she could maintain agency by focusing on what she could control: her voice, her observations, and her actions. The officers attempted to assert control again, moving closer. She shifted her position slightly, following her husband's guidance, ensuring that she had a path to retreat, and that the phone remained within reach. She was no longer just reacting. She was thinking, planning, and using her instincts in a deliberate way. One officer stepped back, seemingly frustrated, and she seized the moment to continue speaking calmly, describing the physical pain she felt from being grabbed and shoved, the emotional weight of humiliation and fear. Her husband acknowledged each detail, providing reassurance and instructions. Her ability to articulate her feelings became a subtle form of defiance, a reminder that she was more than her fear. Her surroundings were alive with the tension of the moment. People whispered, shouted, and recorded, forming an unexpected support network. She noticed someone step closer, concerned but careful not to interfere, showing that human empathy could exist even amidst chaos. This bolstered her resolve, reminding her that courage was not just an individual act, but sometimes reinforced by the presence of others. Her husband suggested subtle movements to ease her physical strain while keeping her protected. She followed these instructions meticulously, feeling each small step as a victory. She was learning to navigate the danger not with brute force but with awareness, observation, and mental resilience. Each careful adjustment allowed her to endure to maintain her dignity. The officer's demeanor was changing, their frustration evident. They were realizing that their attempt to intimidate her was ineffective, that she remained composed and focused. Her husband reminded her to continue narrating, to record every nuance of the interaction and to remain calm no matter what occurred next. She felt a surge of determination. Fear was still present, but it was accompanied by clarity and purpose. Her phone call continued, connecting her directly to strategy and guidance. She felt the invisible presence of support wrapping around her, each instruction reinforcing her actions. The connection was more than just a phone line. It was a lifeline of courage, strategy, and reassurance. She felt a growing strength that came from knowing she was not alone in facing the threat. She reflected on the lessons her husband had instilled before deployment. Awareness, preparedness, and calm under pressure. They were not abstract ideas, but tools she was actively using. Each breath, each step, each word narrated to her husband became a deliberate act of resistance and self-preservation. She was asserting agency in the only ways available to her at that moment. The officers grew more cautious, aware that the situation was being witnessed and recorded. The presence of bystanders added an unspoken layer of accountability. She realized that she could use this to her advantage, remaining calm and articulate while allowing the environment to support her safety. Each moment of composure became a small victory against intimidation. Her husband's instructions were methodical. He guided her to describe her own physical condition, to note every detail of the officer's positions, gestures, and verbal cues. She followed these instructions meticulously, finding a sense of empowerment in each carefully chosen word. Her narrative became a shield, a tool of control in the midst of chaos. She felt the first true sense of hope in the encounter. Help was on the way, strategy was in place, and her courage was growing. Fear was still present, a reminder of the danger, but it no longer dominated her thoughts. She was actively engaged, observing, documenting, and responding in a way that minimized risk. The officers attempted to regain authority, but her calm presence, the witness crowd, and the ongoing phone documentation made them hesitant. She continued to narrate, detailing both the actions of the officers and her own experiences, maintaining clarity and composure. Each word spoken was a step toward preserving her dignity and asserting her rights. Her husband's voice remained a steady presence, providing guidance, reassurance, and strategy. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the conscious choice to act effectively despite it. Every instruction followed, every observation narrated strengthened her resolve. She was learning to navigate the danger with precision and clarity. She shifted her position again, subtly, following her husband's instructions to reduce physical strain while maintaining safety. She observed every movement, every expression of the officers, remaining aware of the crowd and potential witnesses. Her awareness became a tool of protection, a way to maintain control over a situation that had seemed overwhelming moments before. The crowd around them seemed more attentive now, some offering whispered support, others recording, capturing evidence. She realized the importance of community presence in moments of crisis, how attention and observation could change the dynamics of power. This understanding fueled her determination to remain composed and focused. Her husband reminded her to breathe, to remain calm, and to continue narrating every aspect of the encounter. She followed his advice, feeling her body respond to the controlled breathing, the focus, the mental clarity. Fear was still present, but it was accompanied by resilience, strategy, and hope. The officer's behavior was cautious now, measured, as if they were aware that their actions could have serious consequences. She maintained her composure, narrating, observing, and following her husband's guidance. Each step was deliberate, each word purposeful. She felt the growing strength of control returning, the empowerment that comes from knowledge, observation, and presence of mind. Minutes passed, tense but measured, as she continued to follow instructions. She was no longer passive. She was active, engaged, and strategic. Fear had not disappeared, but it was tempered by clarity, support, and focus. She understood that she had turned the situation into one where her actions mattered, where her courage and presence of mind created safety amidst chaos. Her husband's voice reminded her that help was approaching, that the next steps would involve outside support, and that she had maintained her composure in a critical moment. She felt a sense of pride, not in the fear she endured, but in the way she handled it, in her ability to remain aware, articulate, and calm under pressure. She realized that this moment, terrifying as it was, would not define her. She had acted with clarity, courage, and purpose. She had documented every action, every word, every feeling. She had maintained dignity and asserted control where it seemed impossible. Fear remained, but it was balanced by the strength of her mind, her training, and the support she had summoned through a simple phone call. She stood, adjusted her stance slightly, and continued narrating. The officers remained tense, aware that their actions were being observed. She felt the first real sense of victory. She had survived the immediate threat with composure and strategy. The story was not over, but she had established the foundation for the next steps, for safety, for justice, and for reclaiming her life from the chaos that had engulfed it. After the immediate tension with the officers began to ease slightly, she realized that the fight was far from over. The adrenaline was fading, but the physical pain remained, sharp in her arms and back. She still felt the humiliation of being grabbed and pushed, the lingering weight of fear and anger. But now, with her husband guiding her, she felt a renewed determination. This was not just about surviving the moment. It was about taking steps to ensure justice. Her husband had already started organizing support from his contacts, including lawyers and friends who could provide assistance. He calmly explained what she needed to do next. She had to document everything, gather evidence, and ensure that no detail was overlooked. Her voice, still shaky but growing stronger, recounted each action and word, now with the understanding that this record could protect her and others in the future. They began reviewing videos that bystanders had captured. Each clip was a piece of the story, a record of what had happened, and a tool that could be used to challenge the officer's behavior. She watched the footage with her husband, noting details she hadn't realized in the chaos. The way the officers moved, their expressions, the reactions of the people around. She felt a sense of control returning as they pieced together a clear picture of the incident. Her husband emphasized the importance of being strategic and methodical. They wrote down every detail she remembered: the time, the location, the sequence of events, the words exchanged, and the injuries she had sustained. Even her emotional responses were recorded, because they told the full story. This process was difficult, forcing her to relive the trauma, but she knew it was necessary. Her courage was being tested in a new way, not only in surviving the incident but in preparing to fight for accountability. They contacted a trusted lawyer, someone who understood both the legal system and the importance of advocacy in cases of police misconduct. The lawyer assured them that the first step was to file a formal complaint, provide all evidence, and prepare for a careful review. She felt a small sense of relief knowing that someone knowledgeable was guiding them. They were not alone, and the system could work if approached thoughtfully and persistently. As they worked, the emotional toll became apparent. She felt waves of fear, anger, and sadness. She had endured physical pain, but the emotional scars were equally heavy. Her husband reminded her to take small moments to breathe, to focus on what they could control, and to acknowledge the progress they were making. This was a marathon, not a sprint, and they had to pace themselves. Her husband encouraged her to reach out to supportive friends and family, to surround herself with people who could provide emotional support. She realized that sharing her story, even in small ways, helped her regain a sense of agency. She was no longer isolated in her struggle. Others could witness her strength, understand her pain, and offer assistance. The act of connecting became another form of empowerment. They also considered the wider impact of the incident. She knew that what had happened to her could happen to others, and that speaking out could prevent future harm. Together, they discussed how to raise awareness safely, balancing public exposure with personal protection. The idea of using her experience to advocate for justice gave her a renewed sense of purpose. She was no longer just a survivor. She was becoming an advocate, using her story to make a difference. The process was slow and challenging. They faced bureaucracy, delays, and initial resistance from those in positions of authority. She sometimes felt frustrated, overwhelmed by the complexity of the legal system. But her husband's calm presence and guidance reminded her that persistence was key. They kept meticulous records, followed procedures carefully, and remained patient, knowing that every step was a move toward justice. She also focused on her own recovery. The physical injuries were minor but painful, and the emotional wounds ran deep. She sought support from a therapist who specialized in trauma and stress. Talking about her experience, expressing her fear, anger, and sadness, helped her process the event. She learned to balance her emotions, acknowledging them without letting them control her actions. This self-care was essential in maintaining the strength needed for the ongoing fight. Community support began to grow. Neighbors who had witnessed the incident expressed concern, some even offering written statements to document what they had seen. Local activists reached out, providing advice on safe ways to raise awareness. She felt a mixture of gratitude and determination. Each supportive gesture reminded her that courage could inspire solidarity, and that her actions had a ripple effect beyond her immediate circle. Her husband guided her in preparing statements for authorities and the media. They focused on clarity, honesty, and emotional authenticity. They avoided exaggeration, presenting the facts as they had occurred. This approach was strategic, ensuring that her voice would be heard and respected. She felt a sense of empowerment as she realized that the story belonged to her, and she could control how it was told. She also reflected on her own resilience. Enduring the physical and emotional trauma had required inner strength she hadn't fully recognized before. The incident had tested her courage, patience, and strategic thinking. She had survived, documented, and taken steps to assert her rights. Each action, small but deliberate, reinforced her sense of agency and self-respect. Her husband reminded her that the fight for justice was ongoing and could take time. Patience, persistence, and careful planning were essential. They set goals, submitting the formal complaint, gathering all witness statements, and preparing for potential legal proceedings. Each milestone achieved was a victory, reinforcing the idea that they were not powerless in the face of injustice. They also discussed ways to protect themselves and their family during the process. Safety precautions, careful planning, and awareness of potential risks were essential. The husband's military training provided guidance on preparation and risk assessment. She felt reassured knowing that they were thinking strategically about both justice and safety. Despite the challenges, there were moments of hope and inspiration. Stories of other survivors who had successfully challenged injustice reminded her that persistence could lead to change. The combination of personal courage, strategic action, and community support created a pathway forward. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, determined not to let fear or anger dictate her actions, but to channel them into constructive steps. She also began to share her experience selectively with trusted allies, finding strength in connection and collective action. Her story resonated with others, sparking conversations about accountability, empathy, and the need for systemic change. She realized that speaking out, even carefully and cautiously, could empower others and create momentum for reform. The process was exhausting but necessary. Legal documentation, personal reflection, and strategic planning required energy and focus. She balanced these demands with self-care, guided by her husband's calm presence and clear instructions. Each step, no matter how small, was a deliberate move toward reclaiming her life and asserting her rights. As the days passed, the initial shock began to fade, replaced by determination and clarity. She understood that the fight for justice was not a single moment, but a sustained effort. She felt stronger, more aware, and more capable than she had before. The incident had tested her in unimaginable ways, but it had also revealed her inner strength and capacity for resilience. Together with her husband, she prepared to take the next steps. Armed with evidence, support, and strategic guidance, they were ready to confront the obstacles ahead with courage, patience, and determination. She knew the road would be challenging, but she was no longer overwhelmed by fear. She had agency, allies, and a clear plan. Her resolve strengthened as she reflected on the lessons learned. The importance of calm, observation, and documentation, the power of community and support, and the strength that comes from facing fear head-on. These lessons became tools she could rely on in the ongoing fight for justice, for safety, and for dignity. The journey was far from over, but she had taken control of the narrative, asserted her rights, and prepared a path forward. Her courage and determination, supported by her husband's guidance and the presence of allies, created a foundation for change. She knew that while fear would always be a part of life, it would no longer dictate her actions. She had the power to act, to resist, and to seek justice, and she was ready to continue the fight. Months had passed since the incident, and she felt a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and determination. The legal process was moving slowly, but it was moving, and each small step felt like progress. She had learned to navigate the complex system, leaning on the guidance of her husband and trusted advisors. Her courage had not waned. If anything, it had grown stronger with each challenge. She reflected on the day that had changed her life. The fear, the pain, the humiliation, all of it was still vivid in her memory. But now those memories were tempered with the knowledge that she had faced the situation with strength and intelligence. She had survived and she had acted, documenting every detail and maintaining her dignity under pressure. The support from her husband had been unwavering. He had guided her through each moment, both during the incident and throughout the months that followed. His calm presence, his strategic thinking, and his belief in her strength had been a lifeline. She realized how important it was to have someone who could anchor you in moments of chaos, someone who could see a path forward when all you feel is fear. Community support had grown as well. Neighbors, friends, and advocates had lied behind her, offering both emotional and practical assistance. Their support reminded her that courage could inspire action, that standing up for oneself could mobilize others to speak out against injustice. She felt a profound sense of gratitude, knowing that she was not alone in her fight. The legal process brought its own challenges. Bureaucracy, delays, and unexpected obstacles tested her patience. She sometimes felt frustration and anger, but she learned to channel those emotions constructively. With each step, submitting documents, providing statements, attending meetings, she regained a sense of control. Every action was a testament to her resilience and determination. She also focused on personal healing. Therapy had been essential, helping her process the trauma and rebuild her sense of safety and trust. She learned to acknowledge her emotions without being overwhelmed by them, to confront fear with courage, and to find balance between vigilance and calm. Her mental and emotional recovery was just as important as the legal battle she was engaged in. Her husband continued to guide and support her, even from a distance. He helped her develop strategies for maintaining safety, handling media inquiries, and navigating the legal process. Their collaboration was a partnership of trust, intelligence, and shared purpose. Together, they had transformed a moment of terror into a process of empowerment and advocacy. The day finally arrived when the authorities took official action. Officers involved in the incident were investigated, and the first signs of accountability began to appear. It was not the end of the journey, but it was a significant milestone. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that her persistence, courage, and careful documentation had contributed to this outcome. Media coverage began to highlight her story, but she approached it with caution and purpose. She shared her experience selectively, focusing on the facts and the broader message about accountability and justice. She wanted to ensure that her voice was heard authentically, that her story could inspire awareness and change without compromising her safety or dignity. Her children were a constant source of motivation. She thought about how she wanted them to understand resilience, courage, and the importance of standing up for what is right. Her actions became a lesson in strength, not just for herself but for the next generation. She wanted them to know that fear could be faced, that injustice could be challenged, and that they had the power to act with integrity and courage. The months of effort also strengthened her sense of community. She developed connections with others who had experienced similar injustices, forming a network of support and advocacy. Sharing experiences, exchanging advice, and providing mutual encouragement helped her feel that the struggle for justice was not solitary, but collective. She realized that individual courage could ripple outward, creating broader impact. She took time to reflect on her own growth. The incident had tested her in ways she could not have anticipated. She had confronted fear, maintained composure under extreme pressure, and navigated complex challenges with strategy and intelligence. Her sense of self had deepened, and she felt more capable of handling adversity, not only for herself, but for those she loved. Her husband's guidance had been invaluable, but she also recognized her own strength. She had acted decisively, documented events carefully, and maintained her dignity. The experience had revealed her resilience and capacity for leadership in crisis. She understood that courage was not just a reaction to danger, but a continuous practice of making informed, deliberate choices under pressure. The official outcomes, while not perfect, signaled a shift. Actions were taken against the officers, policies were reviewed, and her complaint had been acknowledged formally. She felt that her perseverance had made a difference, not only for herself but for others who might face similar situations. The journey reinforced the importance of persistence, advocacy, and using one's voice to demand justice. Her focus also turned toward broader advocacy. She wanted her experience to be more than a personal story. She wanted it to be a catalyst for awareness and change. She began participating in discussions about accountability, fairness, and systemic issues, always emphasizing the need for calm, clear, and strategic action. She found purpose in turning personal trauma into constructive engagement that could benefit others. Emotionally, she felt a balance returning. Fear and anger had their place, but they no longer dominated her daily life. She had learned to manage them, to transform them into focus, preparation, and advocacy. Her life began to regain normalcy, even as she continued to pursue justice and ensure her family's safety. She had reclaimed her agency, and it was a profound source of empowerment. She also recognized the power of preparation and knowledge. Her husband's guidance, the legal advice she received, and her own careful observation had combined to create a framework for managing crises. She felt confident that, if faced with danger again, she had the tools, experience, and clarity to respond effectively. This confidence was hard-won, rooted in both experience and deliberate learning. Looking back, she realized that the incident had reshaped her understanding of strength. It was not merely physical resilience, but the ability to think clearly, act decisively, and maintain dignity under pressure. Courage was about preparation, strategy, and emotional control, not absence of fear. She carried this insight forward, knowing it would guide her in all areas of life. Her relationship with her husband had deepened. They had navigated a crisis together, balancing urgency, strategy, and emotional support. Their trust and communication had been tested and strengthened. She felt profound gratitude for his unwavering support and for the partnership they had built through adversity. Together, they had faced fear, acted with intelligence, and emerged stronger. The community that had supported her continued to be a source of strength. Friends, neighbors, and allies remained engaged, reinforcing her belief in the power of collective action. She felt empowered by the knowledge that courage, persistence, and strategic action could inspire others, foster solidarity, and affect change. Her experience had become a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. In the quiet moments, she reflected on the journey from fear to empowerment. The incident that had initially seemed overwhelming had transformed into a story of strength, strategy, and advocacy. She had survived, documented, and acted with clarity and purpose. She had reclaimed control over her narrative and her life. As the final steps in the legal process were addressed, she felt a sense of closure and accomplishment. The officers faced accountability, the community was aware, and her voice had been heard. She knew that while challenges could arise in the future, she had proven to herself that she could navigate adversity with resilience, intelligence, and courage. Her children witnessed her growth and resilience, learning firsthand the importance of standing up for oneself and pursuing justice with integrity. The lessons she imparted were not only about survival but about courage, strategic thinking, and maintaining dignity. She had become a living example of strength and persistence, inspiring those around her. The journey had been arduous, but it had revealed her capacity for courage, strategy, and emotional resilience. She had faced fear, documented injustice, and acted decisively. She had navigated a complex system, engaged with her community, and transformed personal trauma into advocacy. She had emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident in her ability to face future challenges. In the end, She understood that justice was not always immediate, but persistence, courage, and careful action could create meaningful outcomes. She had reclaimed her narrative, protected her family, and inspired others through her resilience. The story, while born of fear and injustice, had become a testament to human strength, strategic thinking, and the enduring power of courage and determination.